want to share with you guys a very simple and quick 3-step exercise for surrendering. It works with anything, it works with all of your goals, but I find that it helps even more so when we're talking about a spiritual goal. You can't control your way into peace because control is what's keeping you from it. You see, we're often taught that we need to control things in our life in order to be happy, in order to be at peace. We're taught to chase goals, to become a better version of ourselves. And much of this also applies in the spiritual world as well. But sometimes we forget to realize that when we try to control things too much, we actually end up getting further and further from what it is that we're seeking, right? It sounds kind of counterintuitive, but sometimes doing nothing and surrendering to the process will actually get you to your goal faster than trying to micromanage every single detail. But you see, the ego, which is our false self, our false identity, tries to make us believe otherwise. It tries to instill these thoughts and beliefs that we have to be in control of every single step of the process, right? So if it's enlightenment that we're seeking, if it's a sense of peace that we're seeking, if it's growing from who we were that we're seeking, the ego will tell us, you know what, you're in control of every single step in this process. And while there is some control, the truth of the matter is that a lot of it is beyond our control. And so the ego will try to tell us that surrendering is a form of weakness, is a form of being too passive. But what we learn in the spiritual journey is that surrendering is actually the opposite of weakness. It means that you're no longer trying to resist what is, and you're not trying to disrupt the natural flow of life. You see, it's as if you were entering a river, right? A fast-moving river, and you try to change the course of that river. You probably wouldn't be that successful, no matter how strong you are. Rather, it's best to flow with the river, right? To use the natural ebbs and flows to ultimately get to your destination. You can't fight the river, so why try to fight the river? And this reminds me actually of a story in a book that I love very much, which is Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. Some of you have probably read it or heard about it, but it's a wonderful book if you haven't read it before, or if you want to revisit a spiritual classic that has lessons still relevant to today's world. There's a passage where the lead character, Siddhartha, who is almost a Buddha-like character in his search for enlightenment, he explains that whenever he seeks something in his life, he's like a rock that falls into water. And a rock, obviously, when you drop it into water, it doesn't swerve, it doesn't go left and right and spiral down to the bottom. It just finds the fastest way to the bottom, right? I think the book uses the language, it speeds the way, it finds the way to the bottom the fastest. And so by doing that, by letting go of control, by letting go of resistance, Siddhartha describes that he is like that rock. He achieves all his goals because he goes with the flow, because he surrenders to the process. He surrenders to what is. And so I think that's a very beautiful analogy for today's time, actually, because a lot of the times we're the rock that tries to maneuver and steer and see if there's a quicker way that we can engineer and get to the ultimate bottom of what we're after. But as the analogy beautifully illustrates, the fastest way down, the fastest way to get to the bottom of what we're really after is to let go, is to simply let things be. Now, sometimes people confuse letting go and letting things be as doing nothing at all, but nothing could be further from the truth. Surrendering and letting go means that you are moving forward consciously, that when you do act, you do so with purpose, not with this manic desire to be in control, but rather with an understanding that life requires certain movements, it requires certain actions. But that doesn't mean you have to always be in a state of action. That doesn't mean you need to always be thinking a million thoughts per minute. It just means that you recognize that this moment requires you to do something. But the next moment might require you to be still, to be patient, to enjoy the process. And so the moral of the story here, the real takeaway, is that whatever goal we're seeking in life, especially if it's a spiritual goal, a goal to get a sense of inner peace, has to be done through surrender. There is no other way. We can do the practice, right? We can put in the time, we can do the doing, but we can't forget being the being. Ultimately, we are a human being. We're not a human doing. I want to share with you guys a very simple and quick 3-step exercise for surrendering. It works with anything, it works with all of your goals, but I find that it helps even more so when we're talking about a spiritual goal, which is what this channel is all about. Now, if you'll indulge me for a moment, I want you guys to also practice this with me, because you'll feel what a difference it can bring to your life and how much more easier and clearer things can become. The first step for this exercise is to name and identify what it is that you're trying to control. You see, when we give something a name, when we identify it, it rises up in our consciousness. We start to realize it for what it is. Because a lot of the times we don't really notice or understand or realize what it is that we're trying to be in control of. We just feel a tense sort of tightness in our body. We feel this urge to have things be done a certain way, and if they're not, which they usually are not, to then all of a sudden get frustrated, get angry, get impatient. So I want you to, if it helps, close your eyes and try to really think and imagine what it is that you're trying to control. If it's a relationship that you're seeking, if it's a particular job, if it's a major in school that you're contemplating, if it's a particular car or a house, or even, as I mentioned, a spiritual goal. Let's say you're just trying to let go of some of your habits that candidly don't serve you anymore, and you want to live a simpler, more peaceful life. Name and identify what it is that you're trying to control. And then once you have found what it is that you're trying to control, the next step is to release and breathe. And this is where I tell folks that it's sometimes helpful to do maybe a short meditation, take a couple of deep breaths in, deep breaths out, and really slow yourself down. Allow yourself to actually physically feel the act of releasing, the act of letting go, right? If your hands feel tight, if you feel kind of tensed up, see if you can kind of open up your knuckles and wiggle your fingers and notice that sensation. Notice the lightness of it, right? We rarely notice our body. We rarely notice what it is that we're actually in, the state that we're in. But I want you to spend a couple of moments doing just that. I want you to take a couple of deep breaths in, holding that breath, and then releasing it. Releasing it out into thin air. It no longer serves you. It's no longer going to help you. And once you feel like you've finally released what it is that you're trying to control, the third and final step is to receive and trust, right? Surrender can't happen unless you ultimately trust the universe, unless you ultimately trust the divine. You know, whether you call that God, whether you call that the universe, whether you have a different name for it, they all refer to the same thing. And it's really about trusting that higher power to do what's best for you. And so you can't get to your ultimate goal, you can't get to your ultimate destination unless you receive and you trust. And this requires you to open up, to recognize that you in fact are not in control of everything, but there is someone who is. There is a higher power that influences not only your life, but every single other life in this universe, and every single set of circumstances that either directly or indirectly impact your life. And now is the time for you to stop resisting that flow, stop resisting that higher power, and instead aligning your actions, aligning your purpose with that higher power. Once you do so, once you let down the guard, and start to trust and start to work in concert, start to work together with that divine force, you'll see a big transformation in your life, right? You'll see it'll be night and day, actually. And I've seen this happen in my own life, in fact, where I've always tried to get things done and try to get people to do certain things and try to do things on my own in order to achieve a particular outcome. But at the end of the day, I realized that, as good as those things can be, they're not as effective as trusting the process. They're not as effective as working together with God, right? And that's why when you hear the word ego, which I mentioned earlier, there's a wonderful analogy, or there's a wonderful acronym that ego actually stands for. Ego is spelled E-G-O. Or to think of it another way, the acronym for it is edging God out. When you rely too much on your ego, when you try to control things on your own, you edge God out. You think you can do everything on your own, but the simple truth is you can't. And you'll realize it sooner or later, because you'll realize what's happening to you. You're not supposed to feel tensed up. You're not supposed to feel angry or frustrated or flustered all the time, right? You're supposed to feel a sense of peace. And this is why it's so hard sometimes for people who are ambitious and driven and motivated and goal-oriented to achieve that state of peace, because they're thinking, well, I'm doing everything I possibly can, right? I'm doing everything I can to make this relationship work, but it's not working. I'm doing everything I can to get closer to God, but it's not working. Well, that's the problem. Stop trying to do every little thing and start trusting God. Start working together with God. As we wrap up this video, I want you to reflect on that. I want you to reflect on this 3-step exercise for surrender, and I want you to try to practice it for the next couple of days, for the next week, 2 weeks in fact. Because surrendering is not a one-time event. It's a practice. It's something that you can do every single day with every little action, right? Eventually, you'll find yourself surrendering to almost everything, and it becomes second nature. You don't have to do kind of a formal or a very structured practice or exercise. You're waiting at a stoplight that's taking too long? Surrender. You're supposed to enjoy that moment. Something gets delayed that you thought you were going to receive today? Surrender. Maybe that delay is better for you. So start to do this practice, start to incorporate it into your routine, and see what amazing things it can bring into your life. And if you like this video, then please don't forget to drop a like, and also check out some of the other videos as well that can help you on your spiritual journey. I invite you to subscribe, because every week we're going to be posting new videos that can help you not only surrender, not only achieve your spiritual goals, but to ultimately achieve a sense of inner peace, to ultimately feel like you are moving toward a sense of fulfillment. And in next week's video, I want you guys to stick around, because in next week's video, we're going to be talking about something that is kind of mind-blowing for a lot of people, right? And it's about the topic of spiritual growth, and how spiritual growth and growing in your spiritual practice doesn't mean that life becomes easier. Rather, it just means that life becomes clearer, right? And this is kind of a mind-blowing thing for people to realize sometimes, because they think that spirituality means all your problems are gone. But I want you guys to stick around for next week's video, because we'll uncover the myths of that belief, and we'll instead focus on what spiritual growth can truly bring in your life, which is pure and unclouded clarity. So thank you guys again for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it found it helpful. And if you want some more help, if you want some more personal guidance or instruction, you can also check out my website where I offer spiritual counseling sessions. So feel free to check out www.najimmostamand.com, and there you can find my calendar. You can schedule a free, no obligation 30-minute discovery call to learn more about spiritual counseling and to see if it's right for you. But regardless, I thank you again for watching. I wish you a wonderful day, and I wish you tremendous success in the important art of surrender.